Now 250,000. Now, but to get 275. High, but to get 275. 3. Now 300,000. Now 3 1/4. 325. High, but to get 3 1/4. But to get 325. Now half. Now, but to get 300.
And hello from Dallas, Texas, at Lincoln Center. We are at the center of the universe, at the intersection of 635 and the North Dallas Tollway. We want to welcome you to the Mike McGavel Jones Show. Glad to have you on today. We've got a very interesting show. We've got a lot of stuff going on right now, and if you've been following us on Facebook and on our McGavel Facebook page or the Mike Jones page, you know how busy we are. I'd like to welcome a guest this morning. His name is Joshua, and Derden is his last name, and he has a very interesting story he's going to tell us about, and his life. It's his life story. That's what we're going to get to, but it's going to result in doing some great things for some veterans and people that have been in the military, and we're going to talk about an organization that he is the president of, and he is a veteran of the United States Army Special Operations Command. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me, Mike.
You bet. You bet. So we're gonna talk about your event later, but
Okay.
But initially, I'd kind of like for people to know who you are and kind of where you're from, and then we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of your story, because it's a great story, and anything related to veterans, people know that I'm very connected to the veterans and what they mean to the country, and keeping America safe and sound, and also honoring our veterans. And so I think we're doing a better job today than we have in the past, if you look at Vietnam and things like that. But I also know that there's ongoing struggles every day, and we're going to talk about that. So tell me where you grew up.
So I grew up about an hour south of where we're sitting right now in a small town, Corsicana, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And
fruitcake capital of the world.
That's right, Collins Street Bakery. And so I think you're right. What you said about veterans is exactly right. But so I grew up in a town that is, there was a ton of guys. When I was going to high school, everybody was joining the military. And so I think it was just the thing to do. The guys were, even the athletes, the big time athletes were joining the military. And so this is pre 9/11, mm-hmm. by the way. So end of the Clinton administration. So the military had done some major cuts in size and what they were using. And, bases were shutting down all over the place. And so
they had a closure act, didn't they? Where they were closing a lot of bases.
The BRAC was closing down. The Base Realignment Act was closing bases all over the United States. And so the military was shrinking while President Clinton was in. Then you fast forward to George W.'s time, and his first major thing in office was, we got to rebuild the military. So it was easy to get in. Everybody always says, hey, man, thank you so much for your service. And I say, hey, I needed a job. And they were hiring. and I mean that. I think from an early childhood, I used to wear my grandpa's fatigues around the house, and I think I knew that was the path that I wanted to go. I didn't really know.
You were playing Army?
I obviously had no idea what it was going to result in.
Yeah.
But yes, I was playing Army from a young age, and I was ready to go. My granddad was in Vietnam. He did 6 tours in Vietnam. I had an uncle who did 9 tours as a Green Beret in Vietnam. So those are resumes that are very hard to live up to.
Family of service.
Yes, sir.
Let's go back. Let's go back a little bit. Okay. Tell me about your parents. Tell me about your childhood.
Yeah, so my mom and dad were very young when I was born, and so my grandma and grandpa kind of stepped into that role, mm-hmm. And it was a big deal. My dad was around, my mom not so much, but my dad was young and just trying to pay bills, and so grandma was stay-at-home grandma. She's a God-fearing woman, and she really instilled in me from a young age, hey, here's what a man looks like. Here's the character that I want you to live up to. And my granddad emulates that perfectly. So, you know, what a great blessing it was for me to have a guy like that to be able to speak truth into me, to give me what the foundation for what would be the rest of my life.
Sure.
And so, Granddad was retired Air Force, 20 years there, then did 25 years with the post office. Dual retirement. I don't know how anyone works for the U.S. government for 45 years, but you know, he did it, and he did it, and she never worked a day because she didn't have to. She raised 6 kids, plus me. So
were you an only child?
No. So my parents actually, after I was, I'm 11 years older than my sister, so they got back together and they had another child, which is my sister. And she, Brittany is her name. They decided to have a family now that they were a little older. And I actually, when I was 13 years old, moved in with them, and I spent the last few years before I went off to before I joined the military, living with my mom and dad. So I got to see both sides, you know. But I think that if you were to ask me my major influence, my dad did not serve in the military. Both of his brothers did. But if you were to ask me my influence, I mean, my granddad, obviously. You know, I think that everything that I learned as a young man, I learned from him.
Well, and I can relate.
Sure.
I mean, and people have already heard my story, so I'm not going to tell it. But you know, my grandparents by far had the greatest influence over me, and I have a sister that's well, I have several sisters, but it's a blended family, you know, because my parents were they were split up by the time I was 1 year old, about 1 year, and that was over with. And so I found out what that was like, and so I didn't, you know, it was a few years before I even found out there was another whole family of half. I have 2 other half sisters and a half brother, and then I have a sister that's 12 years younger than I am that I lived with, you know, growing up. But my grandparents were very, I'm not going to say instrumental, because, you know, you're going to have influences with all of your family. But that's the things that my grandparents did are the things I remember the most. And I think that's where those values are instilled. Well, you had a lot of great mentors.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, getting to, I always say, like, I look at how grandparents treat grandchildren and how patient they are. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I'll find myself with my own children. I've got a little girl that's 7 and a little boy that's about to turn 5. Mm-hmm. And I see where my patience lies. And I'm like, wow, how were my grandparents so patient with me? And my wife answers, well, because they'd already done it once. Yep. They were very experienced.
Well, I'm finding out that myself right now, because I have a 5-year-old grandson. And he's a bit of a wild man. That's all I'm going to tell you. Okay. And my daughter did a post on Facebook this morning. She says, I think she said, please pray for my son. There's nothing wrong. He's just a wild child.
So, I can relate to that.
And I think she's exactly correct, because I was up at 5:30, 6 o'clock this morning, and just watching him, and he just has so much energy. And as the grandparent, it's so much easier. You know, because I'm not having to do the disciplining and all that. I'm watching her. And so anyway, that's great stuff. So you graduate high school, and then tell me what happened.
So I joined the military actually prior to graduation. I knew that I wanted to go in. I joined the buddy program with another guy. And so 17 years old. I'm a late birthday, so I wasn't even 18 yet. Dad had to sign off on me to go. So a couple of weeks after high school graduation, I'm headed to Fort Benning, Georgia, which is where boys become men. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea what that meant. You know, it says it on the front gate, but it is the truth. So I went in as a 11 series, which is infantry, and kind of with the hopes that I would find my place in the infantry. I was very eager to, you know, carry the rifle and the machine gun and do all of these things that I had read about and seen in the movies and everywhere else, and really had no idea that how much training was going to happen before they were ever going to let me touch any of that stuff. So, it was great. And so I ended up getting onto a contract program with the guy who who I went to infantry school with called the Option 40. The Option 40 is a Ranger option, which it is absolutely an option. You can quit at any time, and they don't have to push you through at any time. So to be able to go to the Ranger contract, you do have to go to airborne school, so you're going to have to learn to fall out of an airplane. They're going to teach you that very quickly, and then they're going to get you up in a tower, and then they're going to throw you out of an airplane, whether you want to go or not. And after that, then you'll get assigned your unit. There's 3 Ranger battalions, one in Fort Lewis, Washington, one in Fort Benning, Georgia, and the other is at Hunter Army Airfield in Georgia as well. And you get to your unit, you are not a Ranger. You are someone who aspires to be a Ranger, and you have to go through a process, which now is called the Assessment Selection Program. Back then it was called the Indoctrination Program. And the Indoctrination Program was, it was to test your grit, to see if you wanted it, to see if you were going to be the guy who would fail the team when you got tired or you got hungry or there was something, an outside influence. And so I always, the Army in general is not really conducive to family life, I think. They would make you think that it is. I'd say that maybe for senior NCOs and officers it's possible, but for the young man, they used to always tell us, if the Army wanted you to have a wife, they would have issued you one. and that's real. I mean, especially in the special operations community, your time is dedicated to the team. You spend your time training, fighting, or hanging out together. We were our family, and so it was exactly what I wanted. It was exactly what I had always wanted to be a part of, and it's being a part of something a lot bigger than yourself. And finding at home in the Ranger Battalion was exactly what I needed.
So you end up in the 75th Ranger Regiment, is that right?
Yes, sir.
And tell me how that all came about.
So my assignment out of basic training was to 3rd Battalion of the 75th Ranger Regiment. When I showed up, 9/11 had just occurred. We are fresh into the country's about to go to war, and so when I showed up, our unit was chosen as one of the very first units that was going to go into Afghanistan as a part of the initial strike against the Taliban. Yeah. And so if you'd have asked me what that meant back then, I don't know. I don't know what I thought I was getting into. And luckily, there were some guys still in the unit who had been in Mogadishu, who had been in Desert Storm. There were some guys who were just more tenured men who had been around for a while, and my squad leader at the time just kind of put me under his wing, and he became more like my dad than anyone had in a long time. And he was just like, hey, I got you. If you get lost, look for me. Find me, we'll get out together. And I think that he said it with a passion that you couldn't help but believe him. So, man, to have guys like that leading you, you'll go to hell and back. You know what I mean? It's very easy to follow those guys into battle. And so that is why I believe that the Ranger Regiment's criteria for men who are the leaders, especially there, is so stringent, because they want guys like that. They don't want guys who are not going to lead by example. They don't want men. I mean, we live the Ranger Creed. And the Ranger Creed is not just about being a gung-ho war fighter. It's about what's inside of you. What do you do when no one's looking? Yep. And so all of those guys that were there when I got there were a big part of giving me that confidence that we could go and succeed in battle. So, so here we go. We're going into Afghanistan. One of the Rangers' biggest missions in general is airfield seizure. Mm-hmm. So right out of the bag, what do we draw? Airfield seizure. Yep. So here we go. We're going to go seize an airfield in Afghanistan in 2001 that will allow the U.S. Air Force and other forces to be able to land aircraft inside of an occupied country and we're going to do it at night. And so there was a bunch of CNN and Fox 4 News footage of young men and loading onto C-130s when this first kicked off, the global war on terror. And that was our unit. That was our unit loading on to C-130s and C-17s, getting ready to go overseas to go take these airstrips. And then the Delta Force guys were going to be hitting another compound, which was Omar's compound. And all of this was going to happen simultaneously. It's a big, special operations is driven like it's a big warship. Yep. And there's a lot of big players calling the shots, and it was a great opportunity to be involved in something like that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you go over there and you serve 6, is it right? 6?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I know that you got into there's a group also involving the sniper program. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yes, sir. So my first deployments were to Afghanistan, and as you know, very quickly after going into Afghanistan, the United States also went into Iraq.
Yeah.
When we went into Iraq, it really spread special operations and the military in general very thin. Mm-hmm. Deployments became back-to-back. I can actually remember one time the captain was telling us, our company commander was saying, hey guys, we are going to extend you in Iraq for an extra 30 days. And so for us, that was like devastating.
Really?
We don't want to be here another 30 days. We want to go home.
Well, before we go further on that, because you didn't know what you were going into.
That's right. So
what did you go into? Tell me the things that made it so hard for you.
Yeah, so you're going into a land. They try to give you some assimilation training, which is really a joke. They are trying to tell you things that you shouldn't do to offend the local national people, and no one in there paid attention. We were paying attention to, okay, what's our mission when we get there? And our mission was to capture or kill high-value targets. Mm-hmm. So we didn't care if we offended them, if I can be frank. Yeah. We had a mission to go in there, and it was kill or be killed. Yep. Our missions would vary. Most of our stuff was all run at night. You don't go attack guys during the middle of the day because it takes away our concealment, and we have the advantage at night due to our night vision, our thermal capabilities. The U.S. military special operations will come get you in your bed in the middle of the night, and that was what we did. The war quickly turned over there from a war that was fought face-to-face to a war that was fought with an enemy that was unseen. And what I mean by that was the roadside bombs, indirect fire. You'd be sleeping in your bed at night, and all of a sudden here comes a 122-millimeter rocket barreling into the building next to you. And so how we slept at night, I don't know, but we were just so tired we did, Mm-hmm. And a lot of times we get dragged out of bed.
Sleep deprivation.
They drag us out of bed in the middle of the day. Hey, the base just got bombarded with rockets. We got to go find them. And so that was the coolest thing about being a Ranger, was being on a regular base with those other guys. And they would be cowered down in the bunker, ready to receive that indirect fire, and we're throwing our gear on and going outside. And I remember one time this guy looked at me and he said, "Man, they're attacking us from all around. What are you guys doing?" And my squad leader looked at him and said, "Well, somebody's got to go fight these guys," And so here we go out the gate, and the Air Force guys opened the gate for us and let us go. Yeah. But I mean, you're dealing with people who don't know what America is. Mm-hmm. I remember going into a village in Afghanistan and looking at it, no electricity, no running water, just nothing. They were growing poppy seed to make opium. That's how they made their money. And I'm thinking, wow, man, how bad is it for these guys? And I remember a journalist that was with us saying, they don't know flat screen TVs exist. Think about that. They don't know. So what you don't know, it's the end of for them. That's as good as it gets, barefoot and walking on 100-degree asphalt.
Wow.
For you and I, that's absurd.
Yeah.
For them, that's day-to-day life.
Yeah.
So It's a different people. There were good people in Iraq and Afghanistan, bunches of them, who wanted us there, who were living under an oppressive regime. And then there were a bunch of people who were kind of in the middle of the road, didn't care. And then there were some people who would do absolutely anything to kill us. And so the roadside bombs I was talking about became their method of attack. Number one, they don't have to be there to fight you because they know what happens when they fight Americans. It does not go well for them. So they would dig up these holes on the side of the road, place these old artillery shells in there, and then detonate them on the next vehicle that comes past. And a lot of times they would use pressure switches or some other type of radio detonator. So it's very indiscriminate. So it could have been their own family driving by that location and drive over the pressure plate, and it kills them, So
it's insane.
We saw tons of just ruthless behavior. In Haditha in 2003, a woman who looked to be pregnant approached the checkpoint at the dam and detonated herself and killed 2 of our guys. So if you want to say, what did you see? If you can describe something worse than that to me, I don't know if she was pregnant or not. It doesn't matter to me. I'm thinking a woman is pulling on the heartstrings. Of course, our men, they're on alert, man. If that had been a 25-year-old dude with a beard and a mustache, they're not approaching him, But a woman comes up, and there's that moment of pause where they go, man, she needs help. We have to help her. And then she killed these guys, for doing so. And there's examples of that. You go back and read through some of the chronicles of these units that went over there. That was not a one-time occurrence.
Sure.
They would use children. They'd use animals. They would do anything to hurt us. And so the scars that you come away from over there, it's hard to describe for each individual takes it in a little differently. There are certain things that happened over there that are still as vivid as the day that they happened in my mind. And there's some things that just didn't stain, and so, and I don't know what the cause of that is, but yeah, a lot of these young men who went over there, I think they didn't realize, and the women too, the men and the women who went over there did not realize what the potential of what they were going to see was.
Yeah. Well, and I also think times have changed too. The days of watching the John Wayne movies and all the different war movies that we all saw. The game has changed as far as how we fight a war today, even compared to when you were there before, and now what we're doing, or what it's hard to explain even what we are doing right now. But you think about the drones and the things that we have available to us. It's being fought in a different way.
Technology plays a huge role in what's going on today, and I think you bring up something that's very important to mention. We still have guys over there fighting right now.
Yeah.
And it's even for a guy like me who spent almost 10 years in the Middle East. It is easy for me now that I'm home and I'm dad and husband to forget that our boys are still over there getting it on. I mean, you look, they just killed the #1 ISIS leader in the world.
And I find it interesting that we barely mentioned it.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's interesting? It is to me. When we got bin Laden, that was on for days and days. When we took out, what's his name, the other one? I can't remember. Libya.
Okay.
Gaddafi.
Yeah, Gaddafi.
That was a big story. Sure. Now, we knock out the #1 guy, and it makes the news about 2 or 3 days. Really, literally about 3 days. It's an interesting time for politics, too.
It is.
I'm not going to go down that road because I tend to get vocal about it. But I do want to talk about, you put in your 6 terms over there, the tour of duty, and then you come back, you come home, and then you end up going back as a service provider, a vendor. You were part of tell me about the group. I know, wasn't it Blackwater?
Yes, sir. So when I left Iraq, I really thought, man, I'm never coming back to this place.
Sure.
And so
you'd have to question your mind a little bit.
So I came home and a bunch of my guys were being recruited really hardcore, and they were sending me letters too. Blackwater was ramping up at that point in time. Eric Prince was building what would become the largest private security company that the world has ever known. And so here we go. I am home a couple of weeks, and I'm looking for a job, and realized really quick that there was not just a line of people waiting to hire a guy who had just come home from a war zone.
Yeah.
And so,
Not a lot of demand for a sniper.
I had no education. I thought that I could go to work for a local police department, and so that was the route that I tried to go, and basically got told by the police department, hey, you haven't been home to the real world long enough for us to hire you. The chances of you shooting someone is way too high. And so, man, that was like a slap in the face, right? Like, well, what else would you want to hire me for? Oh, okay. That's not the job of a police officer. That is what a soldier does. So my medic calls me and says, hey, that option's still on the table. We're all leaving for Baghdad tomorrow. It's paying a little over $500 a day. I'm looking in my bank account, and I didn't have $500 in the bank. And I was like, yeah, okay. Yep. Send me the recruiter's name.
Easy answer.
So I reached out to the recruiter. It was like 8 o'clock at night. She literally responded right. That's how bad they needed people. She responded right away and said, great, fill out this information for a plane ticket. She hadn't even looked at my resume hardly. It was just like, yeah, here, get on a plane. We'll figure it out when you get here.
You had the resume.
And so once I got there, you don't go through a training for Blackwater. You go through basically they're assessing you. Mm-hmm. They want to see that you're who you say you are. And so you go through a quick assessment, and then you're right back in it. And so our job for Blackwater at the time was just providing security for the State Department. So the State Department was busy trying to help reconstruct the government, the infrastructure. And so the State Department is not, they're not warfighters. Right. They're engineers, they're scientists, they're doctors, they're lawyers.
I don't even think people. I think the average American has no idea what the State Department does.
Well, they have a really difficult job, I can tell you that, and they have to do it in places that people don't want to go, which is why they hire Blackwater. Yeah. And so my team, I actually, served on several teams there, and I worked for them until I ended up going over to another company called EODT, which was the job of EODT was getting rid of all the old Russian munitions that had been stockpiled during the Saddam regime. And I'm talking about millions of tons of ammo. So the Corps of Engineers hired us to go out and blow this stuff in place. Well, so we just talked about the IEDs. So those bombs that we were blowing, or the artillery shells that we're blowing up, are exactly what the bad guys wanted. So when we occupy an area, like they would be in these big earthen bunkers, and there would be a whole complex full of them with a thin chain link fence around it to protect them from whoever trying to get in and get this stuff, and they want it so bad. So when I first got on with EODT, I showed up and they said, hey, go get some sleep, you're going to night shift. And I was like, okay, cool. I thought this would be a really laid-back job. And they were like, we get into a shootout every night. And I was like, you guys. And they're like, no, you need to go rest. And we did.
There's your $500 a day.
Welcome. Welcome. And this was in Saddam's hometown, just outside of Tikrit. So, of course, the local national posture towards Americans was super friendly. We got IED'd every day on the roads. We lost several contractors in 2007 or 6, 7, and 8. We lost over a dozen contractors that were killed by roadside bombs just at that one site. Yeah. And so the job that we were doing as contractors was the jobs that the U.S. military couldn't staff. Yep. The military is a big, big thing. But you can't just have everyone there all the time. The burnout's too high. So the contractors, hey, what do? They dangle that carrot. Hey, $500 a day. And for us, it's a fortune. So would we go? Yeah, and we did. And so there were thousands of contractors over there filling the jobs that the military couldn't staff. Yeah. And actually, I think some of the jobs, like the one that I was on, were the ones the military didn't want to touch with a 10-foot pole. So they were like, you know what? Let's let these contractors guard all these munitions, and then if the bad guys try to come get them, we'll see who wins.
Yep.
And so it's an awkward place for us because our job's to defend it, and their job is to try to get it from us. So
it's like robbing a bank.
That's right. And so it was an interesting job. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the contracting. I think that for me, I was able to do it. You know, when everybody goes over there to contract, they say, I'm just going to do it for a year.
Yeah.
I'm going to pay off my house and my bills, and then I'm going to come home. But you know what happens with money?
Sure.
Is you get accustomed to that lifestyle. You get accustomed to making that money. And now all of a sudden 1 year turns into 10 years. And it's that lifestyle is just addictive. And of course over there, a lot of it's tax free. There's so many perks. Plus you still feel like you're part of the team.
Sure.
That military camaraderie.
You still have a team.
That camaraderie that we were so used to is still existent.
Yep.
And so, it was a great transition for me to be able to do the contracting and make some money too. Because I think what a lot of our vets today are faced with is exiting the military. And so on Wednesday, they're a staff sergeant in the Marine Corps, and on Thursday, they're not.
I've heard stories like this.
And so now what is the question, right? And so for me, the answer was I went on and contracted.
So how long were you there contracting?
7 years.
Wow. So you put in 17 years?
No, so it would have been 6 with the military and then 7, so about 13 total years. But
that's a long time.
It was an eternity. You look back at it and it's like, boom, it's gone, it's done. But now that life has really, I can look back at it and go, wow, that's a long time to spend.
And I survived.
In a very dangerous place, sure.
Most dangerous place in the world.
Absolutely.
So you get back. What year was that?
So my daughter was born in 2012. So the end of my time over there had to be the last of 2012. That was my wife gave me this really nice talk about, hey, the money's great. I know you love the job. It's time to come home. Mm-hmm. So October 2012 was when I came home from Afghanistan for the last time.
So you get back. And what happens?
So I started looking at careers. I had gone to college while I was contracting, so I had a little bit of college under my belt. I had some skills. I felt like managing people and stuff now. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'm going to be a little more.
And you had money.
Yeah, sure. I'd been able to give myself a great start. And so we kind of looked at what I could do. And so I was like, okay. I want to get into somewhere I work with my hands, so I actually got into the utilities industry, and it started off I was going to go and do power line work, and quickly realized that it just was not me. And my brother-in-law actually was working as a contractor for one of the bigger pipeline companies that transports oil and gas, and so he called me on a Wednesday and was like, hey, can you be in Kansas on Monday? I've got you a job making 5 times what you make right now. And I was like, you send me an address.
You're easily persuaded.
That was you noticed the trend, right?
Yeah, I see it.
And so, so I actually went on to work for contract for an oil and gas pipeline company who 1 year after I started contracting with them decided that they needed me to come to work for them. So since then I've been in the oil and gas transportation industry, and currently I manage the whole office out of Fort Worth. So it's done well for me. I've been able to take little pieces of what the military instilled in me and apply that to my day job now. Obviously not the sniper part of it, but other components of leadership there that were ingrained in me to be able to do well in the industry.
I have found over years, because of the discipline that people from the military have, they tend to be good entrepreneurs. They do very well in business because they're a little more rigid. If they've served time in the military, then they just have the disciplines that are required to withstand a lot.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
The good times, the bad times, and when the bad times come, they know that they can work it out and they can tweak things, and they don't give up easy.
Sure.
And so I can see how that works. So you're home and you start noticing some of your friends are not doing too well. I want to get into what we're talking about. Our main goal today. But I wanted people to know who you are, and I'm fascinated by a lot of the information that you gave us today.
Thank you.
That's good stuff. Yeah.
The problem with coming home for me, I had that transition period. I feel like the contracting really kind of let me down easy, if that makes sense. It gave me some money. It gave me confidence in myself to work in a civilian, whether it's not really a civilian life, but it was. I wasn't wearing a uniform. And so a lot of my brothers didn't get that. They came home and they had a wife and kids and no job and financial struggles and alcohol and drugs and all of these things, and thrown into a mix with a guy who is used to dominating at everything he does in his life. A guy that goes into be a Green Beret or a Marine Corps Scout Sniper or a Ranger, you name it, they're used to winning.
It's a testosterone position.
That's right. And so when you come home and nobody cares about that, and you're left to your own devices, who are you then? And I think that the struggle...
You've really been stripped of your identity.
100%. And what a lot of guys don't know how to do is find a new identity, to find their identity in something else. And so, and they don't want to. A lot of them don't want to. And so I think the suicides started probably about 2 years after I left the military. There were suicides going on, but the ones that started to impact me directly were guys that I had served with. And 2 years after I'm out of the military now, all of a sudden I'm going to these funerals, and I'm thinking, okay, this is not coincidental. And I was struggling on my own. And I was just like, what's going on? Why are these guys? And what really hurts is when it's a guy who you looked up to, when it's a guy who you saw as unbreakable, and when it's a guy that, has been shot multiple times in Iraq or Afghanistan, survived that, or an explosion and a complex attack, and then comes home and takes his own life. And so I think that for me, figuring out what worked for me to get back into the brotherhood, the camaraderie, happened by accident. I got invited down to a ranch in Three Rivers, Texas, down by San Antonio.
I know it well.
By a guy named Craig Morgan. He's he's not Texas country. He's a Nashville recording artist.
I know Craig.
And so there were a bunch of other guys going down there who I knew. And I'll be honest with you, my anxiety about this trip, I was just like, oh my gosh, drive to Three Rivers. Oh, clean my guns. Oh, do all these things. And it was just like, I didn't want to go. And so my buddy Greg pulls up in his Jeep and goes, get in. And I'm like, nah, man, I don't want to go. And he's like, we're going to go shoot a TV show for the Outdoor Network, man. Get in the car. So I was like, okay. So I load up and I go down there. And the first night we're there, we sit around the fire. And we start talking. And we talked until the sun came up. And these were guys that I served with. These are guys that I really respected in the community. And I was just like, man, this helps. This helps a lot to be able to.
This was your therapy.
It was awesome. And so I left that weekend going, okay, I don't know how going forward, but that right there is the best therapy we can give any of these guys. Get away from the cell phone. Cell phones don't work in Three Rivers. You probably know that.
I've had auctions. People are amazed at some of the nowhere places I've been.
Right.
And I remember in 1982 or 3, I was in Three Rivers, Texas, selling out probably the oldest hardware store in that county. It was called Lee Odom Hardware. So anybody that's watching this from South Texas or down around south of San Antonio, Lee Odom Hardware was like an institution. Okay. It was a little. The building wasn't any bigger than these 2 rooms, and there was no walkway. The floors were sideways. The building had sunk in the ground. It was crazy, but it was packed full. This little old man, little old woman, Mr. and Mrs. Odom. But Lee Odom Hardware, I'll never forget that. It was a very memorable thing for me. I don't know why. And then I came back 10 years later and sold out the Western Auto Store. But, yeah, I've spent a few nights in Three Rivers, and it's a pretty exciting place to be, isn't it?
Yeah, you get them off the phones and the internet. Well, the internet is just
Forget about
it's
it.
dominating lives at this point. But and you just get back to who you are, and you tell stories. And we used to call a campfire, we call that Ranger TV, because we could just sit out and just watch that fire burn and be as intrigued as we were watching you name it, on television. So I had a big takeaway from that moment as to a purpose for me to be able to give back, and to be able, if I could facilitate that for one other guy, I thought, hey, I win that guy. Yeah. But if I can, and okay, so on to the next one, right? And that was kind of the idea.
So from that is born, tell me how Veterans Xtreme Adventures actually came about. You're the president of it. I want to tell everybody again, this is an organization that I'm getting involved with this Sunday in Fort Worth, and we're going to talk about the event too, because it sounds really cool.
Yes, sir.
But Veterans Xtreme Adventures, and that's Xtreme with an X.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about how you started.
So I did not start Veterans Xtreme Adventures. A guy named Paul Reynolds, who's a former Green Beret, who was passionate about veterans and hunting, was the one who kicked it off. And so he started it. It wasn't an organization when he started it. It was Paul Reynolds and his dogs and a few other guys who were willing to put in the time. So he would go to the Carrick Brain Center here in Dallas, and he would pick up vets on Friday afternoon who were suffering from post-traumatic stress and TBI, and he would take them out to these landowners, and they would release these dogs that chase down pigs, okay? And so they're chasing down these pigs, taking these vets hunting, and then when they catch a pig, they let the vet stab this pig. And so, that is extreme, by the way.
Yeah, it
and
is.
So
I have a mental picture.
So Paul did that, and he founded it. He's the one that started it and got it to 501(c). I think he kind of realized that, hey, this is something that could do a lot of good, but you need the vessel to carry the information. So he went ahead and filed for the nonprofit status, got it. It was all already a nonprofit when I got involved.
What year was it established?
I believe it was 2014.
Okay, for about 5 years.
Yes, sir. So, and then I wasn't involved at that point, but so he ended up moving back to Kentucky, which is where he was from. And when he left another guy in charge, and that was who got me involved in the organization. And really, when I got involved, all that I was doing was, I have a ranch down in Corsicana, and I was like, you know what? I could take guys hog hunting. I have pigs all over the place, and it's a problem for me. My wheat fields right now are trampled with hogs.
Yep.
And
There's a common discussion we've had here. I've had our Texas Agriculture Commissioner sitting in that very chair, and we were talking about the hog problem, and then, just a lot of our friends that have. They're trying to grow something,
sure,
and they can't do it for the hogs, and the hogs are a real problem. The eradication is going to have to get picked up.
It is indeed, and the numbers that they throw out there are staggering. But so we knew, I knew I needed help with that, and I had all the stuff to do it. I had a rifle with a thermal scope on it, and I'm like, hey, we can do this. But so to give you an idea, the very first hog hunt that Matt Yates is my vice president. He's another 3rd Ranger Battalion guy. He's been my best friend for 16 years. He and I got started. Our very first hunt, we basically dumped a bag of corn on the ground and left and came back and walked in. We didn't have a blind. We didn't have a UTV. We didn't have anything. We walked in with a 10th Mountain former sniper, and how it happened, there's this giant boar standing there eating this corn that we dumped out, and we're like, yes. And so he shoots him, and we're like, that's awesome. It worked. Yeah. And so now that we've been hog hunting for several years.
We're in business.
Yeah, we're professionals at this. And what we didn't realize was that there would be lots of nights that would not be as successful. Yeah. But just sitting around talking with this guy from the 10th Mountain Division, I was like, man, this is so cool, and I want to be involved. And so I got involved kind of helping guide hunts. Well, the guy who was the president of the organization at that time up and left. decided to leave. He had some things going on, family and his own personal past that were not so upstanding. So when that happened, we had just put a guy into drug rehab. One of the things that VXA, when we raise money, we're not just raising it to be a fundraising organization. If a vet calls us and needs help, hey, man, if this will cover it, we got you. Yeah. And so a veteran that was close to the group was addicted to methamphetamine. So they went and basically rolled this guy up and put him in rehab forcibly. Yeah. Okay, so while all this transition's happening, this guy's in rehab, and then all of a sudden they're like, okay, who's going to go represent VXA at this guy's graduation? And my buddy Trent Gilley, who owns Magnolia Motor Lounge, where our event is Sunday, you'll get to meet him. He is a great guy. He's been through rehab, and he goes, well, I'll go. He goes, but I'm not a vet. I don't feel comfortable talking to this veteran. So, Josh, will you go with me? And I'm like, nope. And he's like, I said, why? I said, I'm not the face. There's got to be somebody who can be a better face than me. And he said, well, it's you, bro.
You're elected.
And so he and I rode down. I made a deal with him that he could buy my dinner and I would go. So we went down, and the guy was doing so well. And you look at him, and he just looked like a totally different human. And so he goes, hey, man, so what's going to happen now with VXA? And I was like, well, likely it's going to go away. We could still do hog hunts. Don't worry about that. We don't need a nonprofit to do hog hunting. I'll do it anytime you want to go. And he's like, no, VXA can't go away. And I was just kind of like, well, what do you mean? He goes, it saved my life. And so it was at that moment that I knew why Trent had taken me down there with him. And so we get back in the car, and he drives for a while and doesn't say anything. And he goes, saved his life. And I was like, I see where we're going with this. And he's like, I think we got to keep it going. And I was like, that's great. I'll support you guys in any way that I can. Let me know when y'all want to hunt on my place. And he goes, no, I don't think that's not where I'm going with this. Yeah. I want you to be involved at some form of leadership. So Matt and I sat down and we talked about it and said, hey, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a full-time employee with my company and work, a lot of hours, and a lot of them are spent in West Texas. So I said, I don't have the time, but if you guys will support me, I will do what we can to keep we'll keep the nonprofit status, and we will keep taking veterans hunting, and we'll keep making a difference. Mm-hmm. And that was, let's see, that would have been at like December of 2017.
Gotcha.
And so the year that I got involved, we took 13 veterans hunting. And that was different type of hunts and stuff like that. So you're basically looking at like one a month, which you say, just one a month. Well, as long as those are meaningful relationships.
If you're changing somebody's life,
I think
it could be 3.
That's right. 1 wins the war, right?
That's right.
For us. And so what I wanted to do was make sure that we're not a one-stop shop. We need to be interfaced with these other veteran organizations who do jobs, they do placement for these guys, they do different things. There are some organizations that are just set up to help guys get registered with the VA.
Sure.
You know how many veterans are coming home and spending 5 or 6 years laying on the couch, working a minimum wage job and have not registered with the VA? It's mind-blowing. And the reason why is because they hear these horror stories. They know there's a bunch of red tape. So we'll plug you in with those guys if you want to. But we want to make sure that our conversation with you, our hunting trip with you, is not the last time we see you.
Right.
Because we want to get you hooked into our network so that now you're the guy who went on a hunt, and next year you're the guy that takes a guy on a hunt. And so we've seen that over the last 2 years where, and you'll see Sunday, there's going to be veterans there who, when they first started with us, they didn't have a job. They were sitting at the bar drinking what money they did have away, and now they're working, they're giving back to VXA, and they're contributing to society. And watching those guys come from where they were to where they are now, I mean, we got one that's, and I said, hey, if that was the only win, we won.
Yeah. You basically have the philosophy of no man left behind.
100%. I mean, you look at the rules of armed combat, and you look at what the Ranger Creed says. Lest I be the lone survivor. I'm not going to leave any of my guys out there. Yep. And the government will do for you what you beg them for.
Yep.
No more.
Yep.
And so who's going to fill that gap? And the answer is the nonprofit world is going to have to step up.
Well, and that's in all phases of life now.
Yes, sir.
Even the politicians are saying, look, the churches are going to have to step up. The nonprofits are going to have to step up. And as you know, I work with nonprofits just about every day, along with our real estate company, United Real Estate, and we support a lot of charitable groups. And we're very pro veteran. I want to get to our event. We're kind of running out of time. We're kind of running to the end of the show. But I want you to tell us about the event that's this Sunday in Fort Worth that I'm going to be at, helping you raise money.
Yes, sir. So this Sunday at 2 p.m., we are going to be at Magnolia Motor Lounge in Fort Worth, Texas. And we are going to have a number of Texas country artists who are going to be coming out. They're volunteering their time, and they're coming out and they're going to do a song swap for us. We have taken in close to $50,000 in donated items that we are going to auction off. We'll be doing a live auction with you, and we're very grateful to have you.
You bet.
We're going to be doing a silent auction, and then we'll have several items that are available for raffle. So there's lots of ways to support us, and we would love to have you come out and join us. And it's going to be the tickets are $15 at the door. One of our artists is he can't be named on the air yet because he's in a radius clause, but he's going to be at Billy Bob's in a few weeks, and he sells out Billy Bob's. So we'll have some great guys there and some guys that have supported us from the very beginning. And so we'd love for anyone to come out and to meet the veterans who we've taken hunting, to meet the staff that makes this thing possible, because this is not the Josh Derden Hunting Club.
Right.
This is a whole board of men and women who volunteer their time. We don't pay anybody.
Yep.
I had a guy one time ask me, so what does it pay to be on the board at VXA? And I said, it'll cost you a significant amount every year.
Sure.
Not just in time, in money. I expect everyone to give back if they believe in the cause.
So tell me your website.
Okay.
And let's go ahead and get to that because I'm going to have to wrap.
Yes, sir.
So give me your website.
They can find us at www.vetsxtreme.com. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Vets Xtreme, and that's VETSXTREME. And we are on social media. We'd love for you to follow us and see about the hunts that we do, about the veterans' lives we're impacting all over Dallas-Fort Worth.
Okay, so they can go to the website, and
Yes,
if
sir.
they go to the website, will that lead them to a way to donate if they want to?
There are numerous ways to be able to donate there for veterans who are interested in getting involved, whether to go on a hunt or to volunteer their time.
Okay.
There's a veteran registration link right at the top.
I want to appeal to everyone that's within the sound of my voice, whether you're in North Texas, South Texas, West Texas, East Texas, or Southern Oklahoma, wherever you are, if you'd like to join us, it's going to be 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon. And tell me the location again.
Magnolia Motor Lounge, Fort Worth, Texas.
Very good. Well, I look forward to being there. We'll be having a good time. We're going to have a great time, and we're going to enjoy the music. And I'm very honored to meet you and be a part of this. And I look forward to meeting the veterans as well.
Thank you, Mike.
Josh Derden is our guest today, and I thank him for being with us. We look forward to being there this weekend in Fort Worth. For everybody that's a part of this one, Anna, our producer, and everyone that works with the Mike McGavel Jones Show and our company, United Real Estate, God bless. We'll see you next time. From Lincoln Center in Dallas, we bid you adieu.